Bay West Church meets at 100 Emerson Road in Palm Bay at 11 a.m. on Sundays. We're glad you decided to check us out. God has a specific message of hope for your life and mine today. So listen up.
When we hear the word idolatry, we think of statues with weird horns with people bowing down in front of them. And while that's been seen in history, some of the most dangerous gods of today don't really have the traditional altar scene that we're used to. But some gods don't sit on a throne. American gods.
When I was thinking about this series I shared with you guys last week, let's pull this over just a little bit, get in the middle. That'll be good. There we go. Much better. I shared with you guys that I'd seen this promo for a series, and it was for a TV series called American Gods. And of course, I looked it up. I shared you guys with that. And of course, I looked at Plugged In Online. I don't know if you guys look at that, but that's a great place if you want to check out the TV show before you go there to see if it's kosher and it's good. That's a good place to look at it. But I went over there and I checked it out, and I was like, okay, this is not for me. But I read about it on Wikipedia, and I'm like, okay, this is really cool because it's an interesting premise, even though the content is something I can't support. You know, what the premise of the show is that the old gods, you know, from Greek mythology and all that type of stuff, they're still around, but it's set in modern day, and they are being overtaken and washed away by new gods like technology and media, and globalization, those things, culture, things like that are starting to take over because they're becoming the things that people worship. And when I saw that, I'm like, you know what? That's a good point. That really is a good point. That describes a lot about our culture. And so we started talking about, we started this series, American Gods, and we started looking at it last week. I want to ask you guys a question. What is one of the scariest things that you know? Remember as a child? What's one of the scariest things you can remember as a child? Just think about that. You don't have to holler it out unless you want to. If it's really scary, don't share it. But anyway, what? Somebody said something. Sorry.
Chucky.
Huh? Chucky. Yes. Chucky's bad. Chucky's scary. You know, one of the things when I was a kid, Aliens, the movie Alien, and Aliens, the sequel, you know, I couldn't put my feet down in a dark movie theater for a long time because you kept hearing these things run all over the place. But I'm going to tell you, for me personally, as a kid, one of the scariest things that I remember was something that actually happened. And I don't think it was the event that scared me so much as the movie they made about the event. Has anyone ever heard of a guy named Jim Jones? Some of you older guys, older folks, Jim Jones, Guyana. There was a guy, his name was Jim Jones, and he gathered a following to him on religious terms. And as he progressed, and as he went, he gathered more and more people and carried people down to Guyana and South Africa. And they had like a commune where they were all there. As he progressed in his craziness, he began to bill himself as Jesus Christ. He was God himself. And he led 900 people to commit suicide in a commune in South Africa under his direction. And I remember the movie. There was a guy named Powers Booth that played him. And I remember when it came on TV, I looked at him, it just sent chills down my spine as a kid when I would see that image of that dude, because they did a really good job of making him look evil, because it scared the mess out of me, I'm not going to lie to you. But the scary thing about that is that really happened. It's not just a fake story over here. Someone looked at a person and believed in them so much, believed that they were God, and they gave their life. They gave their life. They drank. You hear drink the Kool-Aid? That's where that comes from. They drank Kool-Aid and died, poisoned themselves and died. That's a scary place. But you know what? There's a lot of people who claim to be God. Do you know that? You just do a Google search for it sometime. There's some really interesting people that have claimed to be God. You know, there's a dude. He's about 69. He's down in, was it Brazil? Let me look at my notes. I think it's Brazil. Yeah, he's a Brazilian man. And he travels around speaking to people, swears up, and people go listen to this dude. They really do. He swears up and down that his face is the face on the Shroud of Turin. You know what the Shroud of Turin is? That's the people have found this shroud, and they believe that is the shroud that Jesus was wearing when he was resurrected. And they believe the power of Christ when he went through that, when he resurrected, left the imprint of his face on the shroud. I'm not saying that's yes or no or anything like that. I don't need that to believe in Jesus. That's just icing on the cake. If it was true or not, it doesn't matter to me. But the truth is, he's running around telling people that. And one of the most interesting ones, I think, is a guy who used to be a British Secret Service agent. Yeah, MI5. I'm serious. He was like, he was like James Bond. So it's like James Bond went crazy and started thinking he was God and started to get a following around him. And he actually runs around, he didn't believe it. He believes he's Jesus Christ, the Son of God. And if you look, there are so many people. You think of idolatry. When you think about idolatry, you think about it's these old things. You think these old ceremonies and people in robes, and there's this like horned statue or something like that, like we had on the video. Or some statue, and everybody's bowing down to them or something like that. But that's not necessarily what idolatry looks like these days. Because it is alive and well for all of us. The truth is, we see it around us all the time. You know, the truth is this that for you to understand this, and I would like you to grab this, hold on to this, and realize it. Whatever runs you can ruin you. Okay? Who runs you can ruin you. What that means is whoever's in charge of you, whoever you put in front, whoever it is, the God that you worship, whether man, thing, religion, whatever that is, whoever that is, they have the power to ruin you if you worship them. Whoever runs you can ruin you. Last week we talked about the dangers of idolatry. You know, we talked about when we looked at, we put ourselves, one of the things it is, we put ourselves in danger of God removing his protection from us. You know, we read scripture last week where it talked about God said, all right, you guys talk to the Israelites. You go worship other gods, go right ahead. Knock yourself out. I'm going to let them try to fix it for you when you get in trouble. Because there's no power in that. With so many dangers, we learned from Exodus 22 that idolatry is simply putting something ahead of God. God said, you have no other gods before me. Now, when you put something ahead of God in the priority of system of your life, you're in danger of idolatry. You're in danger of being ruined by something that can't save you. You know, we talked about what your decisions hinge on is the God that you choose. You realize that? What's the final decision maker? What's the first consideration and the final decision maker? God calls himself, I'm the Alpha and the Omega. I'm the first thing you consider. I'm the last thing that should make every decision for you. Those type of things. What is that? What is that drives you in the actions and your choices in life? That is what you worship. And the Apostle Paul talked about it. He was inspired by God, and he wrote a letter to the church at Ephesus. And in chapter 5, he talks about idolatry. And it's a really cool verse. My wife turned me on to this a couple months ago. It says, you can be sure that using people or religion or things just for what you can get out of them, interesting, the usual variations of idolatry. People, religion, or things, the usual variations of idolatry, it will get you nowhere. Certainly nowhere near the kingdom of Christ, the kingdom of God. You know, people, religion, or things. And in looking at this series, that's what we're going to kind of base it on. Today we're going to kind of talk about people. You know, I want to talk about people in our lives that could be idols for us. And you may think, oh, Jim, I don't know about name Jim Jones who claims he's, he claims he's Jesus Christ, and I don't like live in a commune in South Africa. And if he tells me, to drink some poison and die, I kick him in the head. I mean, I can listen to that. I'm not stupid. But see, here's the thing. Most idolatry starts subtly. And it's before you know it, you worship it in a lot of ways. You know, one of the things is when we talk about, and what you're going to find out is it's not just as we look at this, some of you are going to look at some of the things that I'm telling you and the people that I point out in your life, because I'm going to talk about 5 people in your life that could be idols already, that you may not even realize. You're going to find out that this might have snuck into your life. In Proverbs chapter 29, verse 25, says this, says, the fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. Now, we already know from Proverbs 9:10, we quote that a lot, I throw that out a lot around here. Proverbs 9:10, fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Knowledge of the Holy One's understanding. Fear of the Lord, when it talks about there, like we talk about in Proverbs, it's when you put God, it's not that I'm deathly afraid of the Lord, it's that I put him in the first priority. Yes, he's so big, he's so powerful, I can't help but be a a lot intimidated when it comes to God. You know, when I meet him face to face one day, as we all will, we're all going to probably be shaking in our boots, because we won't be able to stand because it'll be something of such immense and amazing power, a presence we've never felt full on right in our face before as we ever have in our lives. It's going to be a big deal. It's going to be intimidating. But what he talks about here, when he talks about Proverbs 19, he's talking about the priority of God. It's where you begin to understand what you're supposed to do with your life. Wisdom is what decisions you're supposed to make with the things you're presented with. That's all wisdom is. And wisdom doesn't even begin until you put God in the first priority seat of your life. You know, and the fear, and what it tells us here in Proverbs 29, Solomon wrote that in the first part. He writes this later in the book. He says that priority of man in your life will be a trap. It will be a trap. It will lay a snare. It'll be a trap for you. And you may think, oh, well, putting somebody first, or putting that first, putting me first, putting that first above God, there will be times when you feel like that is totally the smart thing to do. And what he's saying is, look, when you put man in a higher priority than God, that's a trap. You remember what's the meme? It's a trap, from Star Wars. It's a trap. Don't do it. Don't do it. The fear of man lays a snare, but he puts the opposite side of that, the difference between putting your priority on man, the opposite side of that is putting your priority on God. And whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. Fear of man's a trap. Fear of the Lord is safety. Today I'm going to share with you 5 people in your life that could sneakily or blatantly become someone that you put before God as your idol. Man, I don't worship anybody. I mean, I wrote every time I write a poem to my wife or something, I worship you. But I don't really like that worship. It's just like this, it's down here. I'm just like saying nice things, so we're cool around the house. I don't know. But I'm going to talk to you about 5 people in your life, 5 possible idols in your life, 5 possible idols that you may not see coming. And the first one is this. It's the person you admire. This may be the first idol that you may not see coming in your life. I had a back and forth with a young man that I know here recently, and we were just having a discussion. And we started talking about, you guys remember the human trafficking ring that they busted in Florida? It's been making the news all over the place, right? Some of it right down the road. You've probably driven past the place. Now you feel all icky about driving past it. But, I was talking to him about this. And it was interesting. I'm talking about, these women, they're living in the place. They're obviously from, they don't speak much English. They've been brought from another country, which puts them at a disadvantage. It's not that they're not smart. I'm usually, they're way much smarter than I am because they probably know more English than I know of another language. Because I'm the dumb, unilingual American. That's me. That's what I am. But it's not about, but they're put at a disadvantage. Some of them, their passports had been confiscated so they couldn't go home, and they were being made to work in this never-ending cycle of paying back what it costs to get them to come to America. Now, we can talk about good decisions, bad decisions, and where you put yourself, but regardless, that's a tough situation. I wouldn't want anybody to be in that. When I talk with people who work with trying to pull people out of that situation, they talk about how hard it is to get them out of that situation because a lot of times they have people back at home that whoever brought them over is holding hostage over their head. We won't bring them over, or we're going to have something bad happen to them if you don't do stuff over here. And if you cooperate with the police, we're going to take care of them because we can take care of them before your police can call up, get over there, and protect them. It's a tough situation. It's a horrible situation for anyone to be in. But I'm talking with this young man about this, and all of a sudden, as we're talking, he starts to kind of defend it a little bit. Well, it's not quite so bad because they kind of meant, they knew what they were getting. Why didn't they just walk out the front door and say, I'm sorry, let me go? I mean, they were kind of meaning it, so they were putting themselves into it. And as we started talking, I'm going, this is crazy. And as we got deeper in the conversation, I realized that there was someone that was caught in that he greatly admired in his life. They were loosely associated. They weren't like one of the people, but they were loosely associated with it. And he felt that if he gave any credence to that being bad, that he would be making the person he admired look worse. Anything you put ahead of God is an idol. That's not something God's okay with. That's not something I'm okay with. It doesn't matter who I know that's in it. It doesn't matter who I know that's there. I mean, I may need to step in and help them out and get them out of it, but you know what? I can't be okay with it because God's not okay with it. I can't, just if I admire someone so great, I can't just put them ahead of God. It's easy to see hero worship all over the place. That's another word for it, ain't it? Someone you admire, someone you're impressed with, someone who's powerful. You see it the most in sports and politics a lot. But look, the truth is when we put the highest priority on man, even those we admire, even good people, if we put those ahead of God, it's a trap. It is a trap. And we can worship, when we worship people because they are messed up, we'll end up worshiping their mess ups. It's what we'll do. And that has no power to save us and only has power to damage us and them. Always remind yourself this, okay? Get this. If the people you admire are worthy of your admiration, if the people you admire are worthy of your admiration, they would want you to place God first ahead of them because they would know that that's the best situation for them and everyone is when you are placing God first in your life. You know, if they wouldn't, they need you more than ever to place God first in your life. So that person that you admire, if they wouldn't say, oh, I don't want you to place God before me. More than ever, then in that situation, you need to model that for them. Maybe it's someone who died and maybe they're held hostage by their witnesses, their wishes. Or maybe it's someone that you needed to forgive and now you can't look them in the face and forgive them because they're not here anymore. Maybe it's something like that. You still need to do what is right. You still need to put God first. You still have to realize that where they are now, they have the greatest perspective. You know, when my dad passed away, my dad owned some land, and there was a church not far from where we lived. And you know, my dad brought me up to not discuss business, but, you know, I'm discussing a little bit of it. The church wanted to buy some pasture land from us because they wanted to add on to their church. And my dad was very reluctant to do it all of his life. Well, when I inherited his land when my dad passed away, and they came to me, and I'm going, okay, great, you saw my pastor, now you're coming over here to me with this. And, you know, and I'm sitting there thinking about it, and I'm praying about it because I want to honor my dad's wishes. My dad, from the minute I was a kid, one of the earliest things I ever heard my dad say was, don't sell the land. They ain't making no more of it. You know, that's kind of what my dad would say, don't ever sell the land. But, you know, I ended up selling a little piece of land to that church, and I'll tell you why. Because I was praying about it, I was thinking about it, and all of a sudden God hit me. He said, look, where your dad is right now. And honestly, I pray my dad's in heaven, that he gave his life to Christ. He said he did. I don't know, though. I mean, you can't know about someone else's heart. You can just know what they tell you. It's between them and the Lord. All right? But the deal is this. I know that wherever he is, he has a better perspective on how much that land is really worth. And if it'll reach somebody for Jesus, he'll tell me right now, you sell it, give it, I don't care, do something as long as it will reach someone for Jesus. And so I made the decision, I sold the land of the church. I can't be captive by what is before. I can't be captive by things that don't honor the Lord. I've got to put him first. The second thing is this. The second person that you're in danger, that possibly could be an idol, is the person that you love. The person that you love. I heard a famous religious man recently. I'm not going to say who it is because I don't want to bag on him because this is a negative story. And I'm not trying to bag on people up here. We all trying to learn to follow Christ, you know what I mean? But I got sometimes illustrations of what they are. But there was a famous religious man, and a young boy came to him recently. And the young boy's father was an atheist, and he had died. And he came to the man and he said, look, is God going to send my dad to hell? How do you look at a little boy who loves his dad so much? Goes to a very famous religious person and says, is God going to send my dad to hell? And that religious person looked at him and said, you know what? I don't think God would ever send anybody to hell who can inspire such love from a son. That was a lie. How much my son loves me ain't got nothing to do with whether I'm going to heaven or hell. It's about whether I put my life in Jesus Christ. But the empathy, the emotion, the love, the caring for this little kid caused this religious man to tell him something that's not true, that either he's going to have to be corrected of later in his life, or he's going to go and tell people the same thing and maybe believe the same thing himself and think, boy, you know, if my kid loves me enough, I'm good to go. And he's going to find out some way down the road that that dude lied to him and didn't tell him the truth. Anything we choose to put ahead of God is an idol. You know, there's no one in our lives that we won't want to give everything to than those we love. We want to say yes every time. We want to believe they're perfect and nothing they do is wrong. They're always going to they're not going to fall out the tailspin. They'll come out of it. They're amazing. I love them. They're awesome. I want them to think good of me. I don't want to ever have any conflict. I don't want to ever have to tell them no. But the truth of the matter is that people are fallible. People have sin. And at some point, sometime in my life, to honor God, I'm going to have to tell somebody I love no. Or I'm going to have a hard conversation that I don't want to have. I've had to sit down as a pastor. I've had to sit down as a pastor before years and years ago. I sat down with a dude, and I was worried about what was going on in his life. And man, he was a good guy, and I liked him, and all this stuff. And we went and sat down at a pizza place, and I had to have the conversation about something that's going on in his life because it's detrimental to him. And I said, dude, you know I love you, right? He said, yeah. I said, I need to get in your business. He said, all right. He's like, he sat back, he looked at me and said, well, yeah. And then we had a conversation, and I had to lay out some serious stuff to him, like, hey, man, are you doing this? Is this part of your life right now? Because you're hurting yourself, and you're hurting other people. Now, I didn't want the conflict, and he handled it well, but I didn't know how he was going to take it. I didn't have any idea. He might have gone off and blown off on me and called me ugly names. I mean, there's been people who've done that before. You know, you say something, and they're like, oh, well, not me, you know, and they bow up at you and do all this stuff. But here's the truth. Love is not the absence of conflict. Sometimes it's the courage to have the presence of it. And when somebody is hurting themselves, you have to step in. You have to step in love. You can't step in judgment. You don't step in some kind of arrogance or some kind of spiritual conceit that I'm better than you and let me just show you how things are. But you got to realize, if you know Jesus, you know what sin is doing to that person. Long term, short term, and everybody around them. It's like drinking poison. And you got to step in and say things sometimes that are not well received. And sometimes you got to bear the brunt of hurt and a broken relationship. And you still got to pray. And you still got to be there for them. And you still have to step up for them. Jesus said in Matthew 22:36, he said, Jesus, when he was asked what the greatest commandment was, says, Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. So more than I love any of you, more than I love my children, more than I love my wife, I've got to love God more. And here's the funny thing about that. It's the funny thing about this. It's hard. But the truth is this. I want you to remember this, and I'm skipping ahead, guys. Sorry a little bit. So, but to love people best, you must love God the most. See, if you're going to follow God and you're going to trust the person who created love to know what love's supposed to look like and how love works, you got to trust him when he says do this, do that, try it this way, go this route, go this way. You got to trust him to tell you how to do that. And the truth is that until you love God the most, you can't adequately love other people around you. Because the truth is people, if they're valuable enough, if they're the most valuable thing, you want the best for them, then you need to love them the way God said to love them, and love them wholeheartedly, but love God, love them, love God by loving them. And loving the way God said to do it. That's the best way that we can ever get to a point of loving God. And when we don't do that, when we put people ahead of us, when we don't want to tell them, I don't want to make the hard stand, I don't want to make the hard call, I don't want to say the truth to them, I let them continue in their sin. Why? Because it's easier for me to watch them suffer in the sin that they're in than to tell them the truth and I can pat them on the back and they still like me. I'm not loving them at all. I'm worried about me because I'm worried about what they're going to think of me rather than worried about what happens to them. That's not love. That's selfish. And so I have to love them the way God said. If I trust God, then I got to trust God in how I'm supposed to love people. But to love God, to love people best, you have to love God the most. Third person is this, the person that you owe. Third person could be an idol in your life. The person that you owe. This could be kind of like the person that you admire. You might admire them partially because they did something for you and you owe them. You know, but it's not necessarily the same thing. The person who helped you get ahead, the person who bailed you out, the person who helped you out of blank. You know, maybe you owe them personally or financially. But either way, when you see yourself start to put God on the back burner because of that debt's got too big. And you're misreading what you owe them. Because the truth is this, what we owe God is always greater than what we owe to people. There's a story in the Old Testament about King David. You know, you've been around church much, you've heard about that dude. And he was a great king, you know, but he also had a pretty huge moral failure. It's pretty big. Probably more moral failure than anybody in here. You know, he got lazy and he stayed home when he was supposed to be out at war. And while he was at home, kind of milling around because he was bored, he saw a woman. You know, he began to lust after that woman. She was married. He started he committed adultery with her. And then when after he'd done that, she got pregnant. Then he's like, oh no, we got to have some problem. And so he brings the dude who happened to be her husband, happened to be one of his generals. He brings him back home. He tries to put him in the house. Oh, here, you need to take some time home. Go with your wife. Go live with your wife for a little bit. You know, I know you've been out in the battlefield away from her a lot. You go be with your wife. We all know what he's shooting for, right? But that dude had too much integrity. He's like, I'm not going to go live in the bed with my wife over here while my men are out fighting. I'm going to stay out here in the yard and sleep on the ground. That's what he's going to do. And so eventually David, the only way he could take care of it was he had to get his generals to put this dude on the front of battle, run them out against the enemy, and when they called the signal, all of them ran off and left him and basically murdered him. He ordered this man's murder. Then he married this woman. She had the child. The child became sick. David went in the morning. He was crying out to God. The child died. But you know what David learned from all of this? In Psalm 51, in Psalm, he wrote about this. He said, against you, he's talking to God, against you and you alone have I sinned. Now, I don't know about you, but let's recount the story. Let's see, okay, all right, that wasn't all he sinned against. Wait a minute, wait now. It said he committed adultery. Okay, that was against Uriah and his own wife at the time, wives. He said, then he sinned against Uriah. He was trying to lie to Uriah, and he brought him off the field and all this stuff. He sinned out there. Then he murdered the man. I think he sinned against Uriah. What about all of Uriah's family? Say Uriah was your brother. And David killed your brother because he wanted your brother's wife. You okay with that? No, that's a problem. You messed with my family. That's a problem for me. He sinned against the laws of Israel. He sinned against the law of God. All of those. Don't murder. Don't commit adultery. All of these things. Sinned against God. Sinned against the laws of Israel. He sinned against Bathsheba, that was the woman's name, by manipulating her. He sinned against his family, Uriah's family. He sinned against the people of Israel. All these people that he sinned against. But as he got to the end of it, he made a startling realization. Look, God, against you and you alone have I sinned. Why? Not because he hadn't sinned against them. Not because the debt wasn't so great. But because the debt against God is that much greater. And that's how it is with every one of our sins. When I sin against my wife, or I sin against a friend, the greatest debt in that transaction is not to them, but it's against God. And it's so big, it's so huge, that when you stand the two next to each other, even as big as it might seem here, the one against God is so great, it makes the other one look like it's nothing. I used to have a symbol in math. I used to be a math major. And it would say when you got something, a number that got so low, it would be practically zero. And you would just you make this little mark. Because, it's not really zero, but it's like 0.000000001 or something like that. So small, it's not even worth treating like anything but zero. That's kind of what our sin is, the consequence of you. If you sin against me, the biggest problem that you've got is not with me. Although I wish you would apologize to me if you did. Now, you know what I'm saying? We all feel like that. But the reality of life is the biggest thing is you got to straighten out is with God. You know, because the debt that I owe, I don't care how financial, I don't care how nice somebody's been with me, God has been the best to me. And I owe him the most. The best thing you can do is repay your debts, but also remember who you owe the most, and that is God. Fourth person, the person you hate. Whoa, Jim, not the person I hate. How can that person be an idol in my life? I don't even like them. You think about the person you have the biggest problem with, who just grinds your gears. You know what I'm talking about. Some of y'all thought of somebody right then who just grinds my gears. That's not an idol. I don't even like that person. I don't want to be around them. I mean, you know, I'm telling you, this is a thing. Look at our politics these days. You know, I mean, let's be honest. In the last 8 years, like 4 years ago, if Obama had cured cancer, half of the country would have been mad about it, and half of it would have been rejoicing. If Trump cured cancer right now, the other half of the company would, the ones that would have been mad under Obama would be happy, and the other ones would be, hey, you're putting all the funeral homes out of business. How dare you? You know, you're taking away jobs. I mean, we have this thing. The person we hate, and you think about that. How stupid would that be? We could go back to both presidencies and find things that people did that were good, that some people were mad about just because that was the person that did it. And they didn't like them. I'm not going to support them. I don't care what, so what's up? You'll abandon your morals. You'll abandon good things just simply because you hate somebody so much. That's sad, man. And when you hate somebody so much that it changes what you do for God, and you'll say, God, I'm not going to do what you said simply because I don't like that person. I know you're not supposed to love everybody, but I ain't loving that one. No, I know better. That's your God. You better just bow down and worship him. And if that grinds your gears, good, because it should. You know, I used to say stuff, I mean, we all have people in our lives. I used to say stuff, and I wouldn't pee on them if they was on fire. Heard that? I went further. There was somebody I really didn't like one time, and I made the mistake. I said, you know what? I wouldn't pee on that dude if he was laying in the last urinal on earth and I just jumped 6 Pepsis. I wouldn't do it. No. And everybody was laughing. It's supposed to be funny and all that kind of stuff. And God really convicted me of that. He's like, you know what? You're sitting there bragging about how much you'll disobey me when it comes down to it. I'm glad you hate him a whole lot more than you love me. You know what the truth is? Here's the problem with all that. Here's the problem when we have that person that we can't and won't do for. Leviticus 19:18 says, don't seek revenge. Matthew 5:44 says, I say to you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. Luke 6:27 says, do good to those who hate you. Proverbs 24:29 says, do not say, I'll do to them as they have done to me. I'll pay them back for what they did. And Proverbs 24:17, he makes it worse. He says, do not be happy when your enemy falls. And do not feel glad when he stumbles. You can't even turn in a corner and laugh about it. God's saying, I want you to love me so much. I want you to love others that way. Because you know the truth is when your enemy falls and you're the first one there to help him up, that's the greatest chance, an opportunity you have to show how great your God is, because he'll know good and well for all that he or she did to you. There's no reason in the world that they should be coming to help me other than a God of the universe has accomplished that. That's awesome. You just brought honor to the name of Jesus. Do you get this? The person you hate can be your idol. And there's that pesky example of Jesus when they're on the cross and they're crucifying and they're crucifying him and they're cheering that he's dying and he's pleading with God for mercy for them. Oh my goodness, think of it this way. All sin is meant to drag you away from God. So when you choose a path that isn't God's because of someone else's sin, you've done exactly what sin wanted you to do. The greatest answer to any insult, any hurt, anyone, anything, the greatest answer you can have, the one that you will go to sleep at night with, just fine. You'll wake up in the morning and look yourself in the mirror, and for all eternity is obedience to God in that situation, whatever it is. When your emotions override God's commands, you're messing with idolatry, which brings us to the last person. The last person is the person you are. You can be your biggest idol. John Piper is a famous pastor and author, and he says, desire can be a cruel master. See, our culture's working hard. We've bought into this. It feels good to do it. We've heard that for years, for all the time. Now, except there's this growing hypocrisy in America, which vaults back and forth between, I have no control over what I do, to you must remain in control at all times. It depends on the situation. It depends on the circumstance. You know, if we desire to do it, America and our culture desires to try to make it right. That's scary. You know what? Desire was never meant to be authoritarian. You know, a lot of times this is where it works, and you may say, well, I don't know anything like that. You ever said, well, have you ever done something, look back and go, well, that's just me. That's just who I am. That's just me. You looked at a situation, you've done something you shouldn't do, and you're like, well, hey, that's just me. I'm being real. You know, hey, you know what? We've made a God of being real. You know what being real was? Being real used to be, I'm going to admit my faults to you, but I'm still working on them because I don't like them any more than you do. Now it's become this badge of honor that we wear because I'm being real, you know? No, you're not. You're being wrong. And you need to stop being wrong and you need to try to be right. The only thing that makes you right is Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ coming to your life, you give your life over to Him, and Him changing you from the inside out and making something different that's never been there before. He's holding out the churchy word to you. It's not just right. He's holding out righteousness to you and to me. You know what that's just me is? That's a fool's excuse to never grow. That's what that is. It's a fool's excuse to ever grow, to never grow. I had a pastor tell me one time, said, Jim, don't ever let the way you do it be an excuse for not getting better. Now, that's a hard place to live by. I don't know about you guys, but there's a lot of things I do because I just do it that way. And breaking habits and becoming different, that's tough. But you know, I know my God came, Jesus came, in John 10, so that I might have a full life, the best life possible and imaginable. My God, here's the thing, my God does accept me. My God is real. He accepts me where I'm at, but He does not expect me to stay there. And thank God He does not. God wants the best for me. He wants me to push beyond who I am right now. He wants me to be the person that He made me to be, to get the most out of life, to honor Him above all things. And here's the thing, when I honor God above all things, the best of it comes back to me. It's amazing how He worked it so that when we do the right thing and we are in alignment with Him, we get the best of what life is meant to offer. We don't chase it for the best. We honor God because He's worthy, and then God blesses us from there on out. You know, but our desires get in the way. I want to tell you something. The scariest thing about Jim Jones, back at the beginning, is that man knew the gospel. He read the Word. He had heard it before. But I'm going to tell you what happened. Somewhere in his craziness, he began to think, no, I would rather do it this way. And Holmes took a left-hand turn, and he started following down a path that he would never come back from. Now, I'm not saying he had a relationship with Christ, but I'm saying that he had been told what was right. He chose not going to do that, not going to stick my hand up at the Lord, and it took him down a wrong way. And that's the thing that desire will do for you. This is what Paul wrote about desires. James wrote about desires to Paul. I'm in Paul and all over the place this morning. In James 1 verses 13, it says, when tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does He tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Verse 15 says, then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it's full grown, gives birth to death. See, here's the thing. For you to have the desire to do wrong, God says, I know that's going on. I'm all right. I'm good. We're going to work on that. But what I ask you to do is to not do what you desire to do, but to do what I tell you to do, because your desire is messed up because you have this thing called sin in your life that's messing up your junk. And when your junk butts up against my word, you know you're about to head off down a left-hand turn that could take you somewhere you don't want to go. That's why I put it in the word, so that you would know that. You know, the answer for the desire is always discipline. You know, we always admire somebody who's disciplined. You know what discipline is? Discipline is simply doing what is right over what we want. That's all it is. It's self-control. And that's what God says, one of the things that he blesses us with when we give our life to him. Does that mean we'll never fail again? Absolutely not. It doesn't. But it does mean for the first time in our lives we don't have to. And that God's going to walk with us through that. I'm going to tell you, the thing that is true is that all the people in that list, they really do come back to one thing. It's our desires. The person who I admire becomes my idol because I want them to like me and I'm impressed by them it's me. The person that I love them, but I want to stay in good. I don't want them to look bad of me, so I want to do everything for them, so I'll sacrifice a little good. It's me. The person I owe, I'm not secure enough to stand in my debt to them and realize I have one greater and put it so they're in my face and God's not so much in my face, and so I know that's me. The person I hate, pretty self-explanatory. And the person I am, it comes back to me. There's a guy named James Hudson Taylor, and he was a missionary, a Christian missionary to China. And man, he served there, I believe it was like 51 years in China. He created the China Inland Mission, and he brought over 800 missionaries to China. They had over 18,000 people accept Christ through his ministry. You know, he was really known for being culturally relevant and culturally sensitive. He would always wear local cultural clothing, even when that wasn't really in vogue with a lot of the missionaries, because he didn't want barriers to be there that weren't necessary. But he had this quote, you may have heard it before. It says, Christ is either Lord of all or he's not Lord at all. Christ is either Lord of all or he's not Lord at all. And when it comes down to it, that's really the truth. God doesn't share authority with anyone. You know, when we share the first place in our life with anyone else or anything else rather than God, we fail and we sabotage the other areas of our life. Because see, idolatry is a cascading effect. You know, I love God. I'm here on Sundays. I do my thing. You know, I love God. But then there's one area in my life that God doesn't know what he's talking about, and I'm going to do it my way because I'm just me. What you don't realize is that you haven't put God at the first part of your life, because there's a part that you haven't. And it starts this cascading failure that goes throughout the system. It's kind of like in your computer system. When something starts to fail, it affects something else and just eventually has a failure system-wide. It may take 30, 40 years before you realize it. Or it may take a day. I don't know. But until Jesus is Lord of all, he's not Lord at all. Now, sometimes when I'm thinking through all of this morning, I'm sure that some of you guys thought about people in your life that you're like, you know what? I know they want me to do things that I shouldn't do, or they're doing things, or I'm not going to say something to them because I don't want the pain, I don't want the heartache of dealing with it. There's people that you haven't forgiven, and it is tearing you up inside, and you are now a slave to them and to the hurt that they brought into your life. Forgiveness is required because it frees you. And when you put God in front of all, you don't have to apologize to anybody. Because that is the right place to be. And as I said, that's the only way that all those you value in your life can be treated adequately, is when you put God first and you love them through the lens of Jesus. And love them how Jesus would be proud of you and how you love them. That's the only way it can be done. But that's a choice that you and I are going to make. You know, Rick Warren had a quote one time. He was being confronted on TV about a pretty controversial issue. And he said this statement. He probably said it before, but that's where I heard it, and it stuck with me. He said, you know, I fear the disapproval of God more than I fear the disapproval of man. A good idolatry test is that true for you? Do you fear the disapproval of God more than you fear the disapproval of man? Let's pray.
Thanks for being a part of Bay West Church meets at 1 in Palm Bay at 11. Please feel free westchurch.org. Follow us on Facebook at